All right, going to get to other comments, but first, Michael Richardson back at our show with another $50 super chat. Michael, you're the man. Thanks so much for your generosity, and you bring up a great point. Last week, and at the VOCFB, VOCFB said, well, that was me. Like, I leaned into the Jayden Maiava regression angle. This week, he's a potential Heisman candidate again, which is that he can't be both. Fair point, Michael. So he was regressing. Friday, that regression was halted. But here's the larger point, Michael, because I'm definitely going to give you the detailed answer you deserve. It was Northwestern, Iowa and Oregon, I think, are really going to tell the tale for this season, how we measure USC, how we think of this season, how we remember this season. And one of my main points was the caliber of competition, that Maiava can smoke the weaker opponents, but how does he do against, the big time opponents? So the jury's out. I'm not going to say I'm right or I'm wrong. It's just like to be continued. We're going to find out against Iowa and Oregon, just where this journey goes for Jayden Maiava. So Northwestern does not have the athletes on the perimeter. I would also add, and this is something Ethan was really careful to say, Michael, in previous weeks, we shouldn't just look at Jayden Maiava. His teammates need to pick him up. Yeah. And we saw Jacoby Lane and Makai Lemon get back to being the dudes that we all expect them to be, that we all thought they would be. So Maiava's teammates had a big role in helping him get back to the standard. So no regression talk this week, but of course, going up against Iowa and Oregon, that's going to tell us a lot about Jayden. All right. On our show, we always highlight Gary from Dana Point. Gary from Dana Point. It seems like our quarterback is getting better. At least it seems like, if that's the case, is he at the ceiling or can we expect him to go higher? So, Gary, I'll hand this off to Ethan and Crash in a little bit. My basic take is, in September, we saw Jayden Maiava be very, very clean with the football. And then again, against Illinois, we began to see one or two interceptions creep into most games. And it usually happens that it was in the third quarter. So last night it was second quarter. And of course, kudos to Maiava for running down the Northwestern defender, forcing the fumble. That's a game-saving play right there. Shades of Woody Marks at Michigan last year. That wasn't Woody Marks' fumble, but a ball was on the turf. Michigan recovers. Woody punches the ball out and recovers the fumble. Just a baller move. And one of the things that Ethan and Crash have been saying all season, and it's absolutely true, is that Jayden Maiava, he might make mistakes, but he shrugs them off. And he has the calm, steady, focused demeanor of a leader, of a good teammate. That's the thing I'm going to remember about Jayden Maiava the most from this season, is that good teammate, good vibes, positive force, positive presence, on this team, in this locker room. And that play against Northwestern epitomized Jayden Maiava. Not perfect, we do need to see him get to that higher standard. And Gary, we'll address that in just a second. But just for the moment, he's always about team first. He's about winning. That play last night showed why. So in terms of Maiava reaching his ceiling, Gary, we just need to see a game in which he doesn't slip. Dodger fans are grateful that Jeff Hopman threw that one hanging slider to Miguel Rojas. Well, Jayden Maiava has to avoid that one hanging slider, right? Elite players, this is the John Madden football Bible. Great players make big plays in championship games. And so we're getting to that point with the Oregon game, and just hopefully USC can get past Iowa, which, I'm not taking that for granted as a W. I think that's going to be a street fight. Not convinced at all that that's, a lock for USC. But, if USC can get past it, then you have the trip to Oregon for, as Brent Musburger would say, all the Tostitos against the Ducks. And that, hopefully if USC can be 8-2 going to Eugene, Gary, then we're going to see this. It would be the test of greatness. Can you walk into an enemy lair late November, everything on the line, and deliver, Yamamoto style. Can you be Yamamoto? Just being flawless, locating all of your throws consistently for the duration, when everything's on the line. So we're about to find out if Jayden Maiava can be at that higher standard, but just, he's in that mode where, he can play generally well, but he hangs one or two sliders and just, like you just need to weed that out, and you need to have that self-control to not make those one or two bad decisions that can undo a really good day of work. So Ethan, Crash, your thoughts about Gary from Dana Point asking about, what can we expect about Jayden Maiava doing better? Is there any other nuance or particular point of focus that you see in Jayden Maiava's game right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you mentioned that play where he made the tackle, and, that he just is a team player. And so I just wanted to bring up this quote from him after the game. He said, "I just sacrificed my body for my brothers." Like, there you go. Team player, put his body on the line. Not quite a Ryan Sayuri quote, but pretty close. It's a good one. So thought I'd throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, everything you said about Maiava, like him being a team player and him really rebounding from his mistakes, like that's something that we've seen in basically every game except for last year's Notre Dame game. Like last year's Notre Dame game, USC was in a position to win, and then he threw a pick six that was returned 99 yards for a touchdown, and then went down and did it again, and that kind of sunk. Like that was the one game where I would say that like Maiava's mistake specifically sunk USC's chances at winning the game, because like Jacoby Lane was having a good game. The defense wasn't playing all that well either. But like Jacoby Lane was having an incredible game. I think he had like 3 touchdowns in that game. And like USC had a chance to take down Notre Dame. And then, 2 really critical mistakes in the red zone from Maiava there. But every other game, kind of like you mentioned, like even like some of the games where he's had some really critical, consistent mistakes, like, last year in the Texas A&M bowl game threw 3 interceptions. This year against Nebraska, like just couldn't throw the ball effectively all game at all. Even in games like that, like he finds something in his bag of tricks to where he can still impact the game positively. Against Texas A&M, it was that he just kept slinging it, and he kept, throwing. He did kind of what we hadn't seen from Miller Moss all year, which is that he kept making, taking risks, and, instead of them being bad risks that, sank USC like it was in the beginning of the game, they started paying off, and like his gunslinging won USC that game. Against Nebraska, like he, kind of was self-aware enough to say, all right, like I've, kind of tried my best, and this offense has tried its best to take down this mighty Nebraska secondary, which, credit Nebraska, they have the best secondary in the country, or at least top 3. So like, he was self-aware enough to say, all right, like we've kind of tried everything. It's not really working. So I need to impact the game in a different way. And he started running the football. So, which we hadn't really seen him do all year. So using kind of that as my springboard, I think like, to me, it's not quite as like clear as like, oh, he just needs to clean up his mistakes, because he could start playing more conservatively and not make any mistakes, but also throw for 150 yards. Like, I think like there's Maiava, like has been like, one of the things that I like about Maiava is kind of what you said. Like when he does make a mistake, he keeps playing. And like, there's just kind of this attitude that has generally worked out for USC and for Lincoln Riley in every game, again, except for that Notre Dame game last year, where like continuing to trust Maiava, even if he's struggling, tends to work out in USC's favor. And, there's this quote that Lincoln Riley has brought up. I think it was, I don't remember if it was after the Nebraska game or before the Nebraska game, but he says that like every time that, he's gone on the field for us, like he's put us in a position to win. Like, and, we've been in it in kind of the final seconds. And so, and I would agree with Lincoln Riley on that. Again, every game except for the Notre Dame game last year, which I think is the one exception. But yeah, I mean, I think, though, like if he can throw 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, like that would be awesome. I don't think it's necessarily just like as simple as cleaning up the interceptions. I think it's, him. I think the key for me is him putting it together in like the really highly pressure filled moments because he's a much calmer guy. Like last year, we didn't really see him play a totally calm game at all. Like I think even in the Nebraska game, like he had some first game jitters. I think he threw a pick 6 to Sear right in that game. In the UCLA game, like the passing offense never really got going. And then we talked about Notre Dame and we talked about Texas A&M. This year, like he really puts it together, like you said, against inferior opponents. Like last night was probably his best performance against a good secondary, which was good to see because, Northwestern's secondary numbers are not quite on Nebraska's level, but they're pretty good by Big Ten standards. Like they had held every QB that they'd played under 300 yards. And the only quarterback that had gotten over 200 yards was Ryan Brown. So it was kind of a fluke because Purdue was playing from behind that whole game. Like not even Dante Moore got 200 yards on this Northwestern defense. So I think, credit to him there. And that's like a really great thing to see. But there's the added wrinkle of course, USC was at home. And Maiava seems a lot more comfortable at home. And so does this entire USC team. So, the Iowa game and the Nebraska game are real hallmarks of like, can he exhibit that same comfortability that he's seen when he's, been dominant early in the season, last night, to a degree against Michigan. And, because it seems like, he's a much more confident guy, but there's still this limit, like against Notre Dame and against Nebraska, like he was limited a little bit by like his skittishness. And so I would like to see like him say, hey, like football's football. Like, yes, the other team is going to make plays and I might make mistakes, but like, can I still keep slinging it? Like last night, he was pretty fearless, and I think that was to his advantage. Like there were some throws that I wouldn't have advised him to make, but he made them, and it benefited USC. So like, can he bring that confidence? Well-directed confidence again, like not like bad, dangerous, scary confidence, but can his confidence just take that last step? I think is what I'm looking for.
So I think to answer this question, you have to look at. Obviously, like we've talked about here, he's obviously done really well against the inferior opponents: Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State. Then kind of those next 4 games was kind of when we saw kind of what we thought a bit of a regression. And I more want to, make sure that we note that it's obviously part of it is due to, you're playing better competition. Your numbers are just naturally going to go down. Although his did seem to get a bit kind of worse than just the typical, you're playing better competition. What'd you expect? However, so I think the thing that shows, like, I don't think Maiava is at his ceiling, but I think he's got a bit to go. And I think the test to see it is, can he do well against a good defense? And I think the next 2 games, especially with Iowa and Oregon, are going to be an opportunity for him to show that he can take that next step and prove that he is this elite quarterback, that he is potentially a Heisman candidate. I think that's where we could see this. But I think it's going to take him playing very well against both Oregon and Iowa to do that. And I thought he had a better game for sure, like we talked about here, like last night against Northwestern. But there are definitely some frustrating things. But I think the fact that he's super fearless and is willing to take those big risks, and then also, you got to give him credit, like you said, for putting his body on the line for his team, especially after he had that what was looking like a costly pick, is that he's not afraid of those risks. So I think that it will work to his advantage, especially as he starts, playing better defenses. So I'd really like to see him, find a way to, keep playing aggressive, play aggressive and play well, but just hopefully find a way to just not make those costly mistakes that have, sometimes sunken in some of those bigger